There's a show that launched Star Trek. It also launched Mission Impossible. Its writers went on to create Dirty Harry. One of the only female directors working in television in the 1950s got her shot because of it. And the man who ran it, who controlled every script, every director, every guest actor for 6 straight years, who was at one point the highest paid man on American television. Most people today have no idea who he was. His name was Richard Boone, and the story of how he got there. And why you've probably never heard of him is one of the strangest careers in the history of the medium. Let's start from the beginning, because the beginning makes no sense. Part 1. The Accidental Actor. Richard Boone was born in Los Angeles in 1917. His family was comfortable. His father was a corporate attorney, and by all outward signs, Richard was on a normal track. He went to Stanford. He joined a fraternity. He apparently won the Pacific Coast Intercollegiate Light Heavyweight Boxing Championship, which explains the famously crooked nose. Then he dropped out and enrolled in art school to paint abstract cityscapes. When World War II started, he enlisted in the Navy and ended up as a tail gunner on Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bombers, one of the most dangerous jobs in naval aviation. He served on 3 separate aircraft carriers, the USS Enterprise, the USS Intrepid, and the USS Hancock. He flew combat missions across the Pacific. He came home a petty officer first class with 2 battle stars. And here is the detail that changes everything. In his own words from a 1970 interview, you can't carry an easel on a torpedo plane, so I wrote short stories imitating Hemingway and Dos Passos, but I realized my dialogue was poor. So when the war ended, he used his GI Bill to enroll at the neighborhood playhouse in New York, not to become an actor, but to learn how dialogue sounded. He figured if he spent time around performers, his fiction would improve. His acting teacher was Sanford Meisner. His movement teacher was Martha Graham. His classmates at the Actors Studio included Marlon Brando, Carl Malden, Eva Marie Saint, and Julie Harris. He was a Stanford dropout and a former tail gunner doing modern dance with the mother of the form, trying to write better short stories. Then he realized he was good at performing. The short stories were quietly abandoned. He made his Broadway debut in 1947. Within a few years, director Louis Milestone heard his voice during a screen test, that deep, unmistakable baritone, and got him a 7-year contract at 20th Century Fox. Boone later described what Fox did with him. For 3 years, I didn't play anything but dirty men. I seldom got to shave. He wasn't wrong. Fox spent 3 years casting him as the heavy in westerns and war pictures. He played Pontius Pilate in The Robe. He played a detective. He played soldiers and outlaws. The studio had no idea what to do with a man who could quote Shakespeare, paint abstracts, and break noses. Then NBC gave him a show, and things got interesting. Part 2. The Doctor Who was too early. In 1954, Boone began starring in Matic, a medical anthology series on NBC. He narrated and occasionally starred as Dr. Conrad Steiner, and the show was unlike anything on television at the time. It filmed inside real hospitals. It used actual medical equipment. It depicted procedures with a clinical accuracy that made network executives deeply uncomfortable. The pilot featured genuine footage of a live birth. For 1954 American television, that was extraordinary. Later episodes tackled euthanasia, leprosy, sterility, and the medical aftermath of a nuclear attack. An episode featuring a black physician was quietly pulled by Southern affiliate stations. Cardinal Spellman of the New York Archdiocese personally objected to an episode depicting a cesarean section, and NBC buckled and censored it. The show won 2 Emmy Awards. Then it was canceled after 2 seasons, crushed in the ratings by I Love Lucy. Every major medical drama that followed, Ben Casey, Marcus Welby, Grey's Anatomy, owes something to the show Richard Boone anchored before the audience was ready for it. CBS noticed they had something very specific in mind for him. Part 3. Paladin. On September 14, 1957, Have Gun Will Travel premiered on CBS, and Richard Boone became Paladin. The character was unlike anything the Western genre had produced. Paladin was a gentleman gunfighter for hire who lived in luxury at San Francisco's Hotel Carlton. He dined on gourmet French cuisine. He attended the opera. He quoted Shakespeare and Keats and Herodotus from memory. He played chess. And when the job called for it, he put on all black Western clothes, buckled on a holster bearing a silver chess knight, and rode out to deliver justice with a Colt .45. Boone described the concept this way: "We deliberately set out to create an elegantly deadly character as different as possible from any other. We gave him an education with a knowledge of foreign languages and the classics, so he wouldn't appear to be just another guy who had spent his entire life on the main street of Dodge City." The role, reportedly, was originally offered to Randolph Scott, who was unavailable. By one account, Scott himself handed the script to Boone while they were filming together on 10 Wanted Men. Whether that's exactly how it happened, Boone got it, and it defined the rest of his life. Over 6 seasons and 225 episodes, the show was consistently ranked in the top 4 programs in the country, peaking at third behind only Gunsmoke and Wagon Train. Boone appeared in every single episode. But here's what separated him from every other actor on television. He didn't just star in the show, he ran it. Boone wielded an unusual degree of influence on the show beyond his own character. He exerted influence on scripts, on the look of the show, on who directed, and on casting. He directed 19 episodes himself. He handpicked guest stars. He vetoed directors he didn't trust. He fought for women and minorities to get meaningful work on the show at a time when that required an actual fight. He championed Ida Lupino, one of the only female directors working in television in the 1950s, and she helmed multiple episodes. He personally battled to keep singer Johnny Western, who co-wrote the show's closing ballad with Boone and creator Sam Rolfe, as the performer of that song when Mitch Miller wanted to replace him with Jerry Vale. Western kept the song. In a 1963 interview, Boone said, "Talent is not a golden rarity among humans. There is more talent walking the streets of the world than there are pretty girls and bald men. Unfortunately, most talent lives and dies unrecognized." He said that about other people, but it applies to him too. Part 4, the writer's room that changed everything. Here's the thing that people don't fully appreciate about Have Gun Will Travel. The show wasn't just a hit. It was a training ground for the people who would build the next 50 years of American television. Gene Roddenberry, the man who would create Star Trek, wrote 24 episodes of the series and won a Writers Guild Award for his work on it. He was there from the 3rd episode. Years later, when Roddenberry was pitching a character for a proposed Star Trek spin-off called Assignment Earth, he cited Paladin by name as his model, describing Paladin's remarkable knowledge, attitudes, and abilities that made him seem like a man from another place and time. Bruce Geller wrote for the show and went on to create Mission Impossible. Sam Peckinpah contributed scripts. Harold Jack Bloom, another writer on the series, later created Heck Ramsey, which also starred Boone, and the 1970s drama Emergency. Harry Julian Fink wrote for the show and later co-created Dirty Harry. The opening sequence of the 1973 Dirty Harry sequel Magnum Force deliberately echoes Have Gun Will Travel's iconic intro, with a gun slowly cocked and pointed at the camera. All of these careers, Star Trek, Mission Impossible. Dirty Harry passed through the writer's room of a CBS Western that Richard Boone was quietly steering from the inside. He gave those writers something rare, a character with enough intellectual and moral weight that's serious. Storytelling was possible within a genre everyone else treated as disposable. Part 5, The Man Who Walked Away. In 1963, at the peak of the show's popularity, Boone did something nobody could explain. He quit. He ended Have Gun Will Travel voluntarily, walked away from the ratings and the money, and launched a dramatic anthology series on NBC called The Richard Boone Show. It was modeled on repertory theater, a rotating company of 15 actors including Robert Blake and Harry Morgan, with playwright Clifford Odets as story editor. Serious ensemble work, the kind of television Boone actually believed in. It won a Golden Globe for Best TV Show. Critics respected it, audiences didn't come. Crushed in the ratings by Petticoat Junction, it was canceled after 1 season. When someone asked if he regretted leaving Paladin behind, Boone was characteristically direct. "It was a ridiculous thing, but I don't ever have to worry about money. As a result of playing Paladin, I have what is known to actors as a lot of go-to-hell money." He then moved to Hawaii for 7 years. He helped persuade producer Leonard Freeman to film Hawaii Five-O entirely on location in the islands rather than on a California soundstage. Freeman, grateful, offered him the lead role, Steve McGarrett. Boone turned it down. The role went to Jack Lord, who had appeared alongside Boone in the very first episode of Have Gun Will Travel. Lord played Mick Garrett for 12 seasons and became a television institution. Boone tried to launch his own Hawaii-based series, but CBS chose Hawaii Five-O instead. He made films throughout the 1970s. He appeared with John Wayne in The Alamo, Big Jake in The Shootist, Wayne's final film, Wayne personally asked for him on that last one. He voiced the dragon Smaug in the 1977 Rankin-Bass animated adaptation of The Hobbit. It's possibly the most perfect casting decision anyone has ever made. He moved to Florida, wrote a newspaper column, taught acting at Flagler College, directed local theater. In the last year of his life, he was appointed Florida's cultural ambassador. He was also drinking heavily, had been for decades, and smoking somewhere between 60 and 100 cigarettes a day. A dentist caught the tumor during a routine exam, throat cancer, the same disease that had struck his old mentor, Sanford Meisner. On January 10, 1981, Richard Boone died at his home in St. Augustine, Florida. He was 63. His wife, Claire, a former ballerina. His third and final wife, married since 1951, was with him. His ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean off Hawaii, the same waters he'd flown combat missions over as a young tail gunner, the same islands where he'd tried to build a second life after television. He received 5 Emmy nominations and never won. He won a Golden Globe. He has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. By 1981, the television Western was effectively dead as a genre, and the industry had largely moved on. What stays with you about Richard Boone is how much of what he built he never got credit for. He ran one of the most influential writers' rooms in television history and is remembered, if at all, as the guy who played the cowboy. The writers he championed, Roddenberry, Geller, Peckinpah, went on to have their names attached to franchises that still exist today. Boone's name mostly disappeared. But let's slow down on that for a second, because I don't think people fully grasp the scale of what was happening inside that show. When Gene Roddenberry was pitching Star Trek to NBC in 1964, he described the concept as a wagon train to the stars. That's the famous phrase. What people don't talk about as much is that when he was developing a character for a proposed Star Trek spin-off years later, he didn't reach for a science fiction reference. He reached for Paladin. He specifically cited Paladin's ability to seem like a man from another time and place. Someone who viewed the world from a detached, almost superior perspective as the model for what he was building. Spock carries some of that DNA. So does every Federation officer who quotes philosophy before making a moral decision in a tight situation. You can draw a straight line from a chess knight on a leather holster in 1957 San Francisco to the bridge of the Enterprise. Bruce Geller watched how Boone ran a show, how a team of specialists with different skills could be assembled around a single central mission, and built mission. Impossible around exactly that structure. The IMF team isn't so different from the rotating company Boone tried to build with the Richard Boone Show. He was just a decade too early for that idea to find an audience. And Dirty Harry, the 1973 sequel, Magnum. Force opens with a close-up of a gun being slowly cocked and pointed directly at the camera, with a cool one-liner delivered over it. That is the have gun. Will travel opening sequence transplanted into a San Francisco crime film. Harry Fink, who wrote for Boone's show, helped create Dirty Harry. The influence wasn't accidental. It was direct. None of this makes Richard Boone a hidden genius who deserves more fame than the people who actually built those franchises. Roddenberry built Star Trek, Geller built Mission Impossible. That work belongs to them. But Boone gave them a place to develop the instincts that made those things possible. He insisted on moral complexity in a genre that didn't require it. He pushed for stories that used the Western setting to say something about the present day, the same trick Roddenberry perfected by moving the whole operation to outer space. He created the conditions for serious television writing to exist at a time when almost nobody thought that was worth doing. And then there's the personal contradiction that makes him genuinely hard to categorize. This was a man who could sit across a dinner table from you and recite Keats from memory and then get into a fistfight in the parking lot afterward. His alcoholism was real and it damaged him, especially in the later years when directors started hesitating to cast him because they weren't sure he'd show up ready to work. The man who once had final say over every script on the third most popular show in America ended up dubbing his own dialogue in a low-budget Israeli Western because he'd walked off set before recording it. He later described that film with what can only be called impressive self-awareness. I'm starring in the worst picture ever made. The producer is Israeli and the director's Italian, and they don't speak. Fortunately, it doesn't matter because the director's deaf in both ears. He never stopped painting. He never stopped reading Shakespeare. He taught acting until his body wouldn't let him continue. And there's a dark irony in the fact that the school he returned to teach at, the neighborhood playhouse, had him temporarily replacing Sanford Meisner, his own mentor, because Meisner was being treated for throat cancer. The same disease that would eventually come for Boone, too. He was a frontiersman's descendant who wanted to be a painter. a boxing champion who studied modern dance, a tail gunner who enrolled in acting school to improve his fiction and accidentally became one of the most powerful men on television, a man who walked away from all of it twice, once for art, once for Hawaii, and turned down one of the most iconic roles in TV history both times he had the chance to stay. When it was over, they scattered his ashes in the Pacific because that's where the war had been, and that's where his peace was. If this story is new to you, I'd genuinely love to know which part hit different. The fact that he turned down Steve McGarrett, that Roddenberry used Paladin as the blueprint for Spock, that the man who helped launch Star Trek is buried at sea and largely forgotten. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories about people who shaped everything and got remembered for nothing, subscribe. That's exactly what this channel is here for. See you in the next one.